So exercise number 3. When Mary died in 2018, she left her child $500,000 in cash generated from labor earnings, $5 million in stock that she had purchased for $700,000 in 1995. So she paid for this by labor earnings, with labor earnings, and a $6 million home she purchased with labor earnings for $800,000 in 1990. Evaluate the argument that the estate tax, so the estate tax is a tax that you would pay if you inherit the house from, so if the child from Mary inherits the house after she dies. So evaluate the argument that the estate tax represents double taxation of Mary's income. So the idea here would be that Mary had already paid income taxes, and now if so she paid income taxes in order to be able to buy all those things, the house and the stock, and also to have the cash. And then basically, when Mary is inheriting everything to the child, she has to pay taxes again. So let's evaluate the argument whether this is really double taxation or not. Okay, so first of all, let us kind of summarize what the total estate of Mary is. So the total amount that she's kind of inheriting to a child. So the total estate is $11.5 million. So it's the 500,000 cash. It's the $5 million in stock. So we have 5,500,000, and it's the $6 million home. So in total, $11.5 million. So in 2018, this is something that you can look up online easily. The exemption or the estate tax is the exemption was $11 million. Therefore, only 500K, so only $500,000 of Mary's estate will be taxed. When she dies. Okay, so only the $500,000 kind of cash will be taxed when she's inheriting this to her child in case of death. The stock and the house will receive a basis step-up death. At death. This means that only if the child of Mary would keep the stock and the house, and the stock price would increase or the house price would increase, only then she would have to pay taxes if she would sell the stock and the houses at some point in the future. So child only has to pay taxes on gains due to the stock or the house after 2018. In 2018, she can sell, or the child can sell. So the child can sell both the stock and the house with no further gain. Therefore, the child would not pay any taxes on the stock or the house. Okay, so you can already see that here we don't have, so at least there is a possibility for double taxation not happening here in this case. And especially for the value of the house and the stock in 2018, if there is no gain, so if it's remaining in this kind of status, then independent of when the child is selling both the stock and the house in the future, no taxes have to be paid. Only if there is kind of an addition, so something is coming on top of those values, then the child has to pay taxes. So if you think about it, the amount of money that the child gets inherited, so in terms of um, the house and the stock, will not get taxed twice actually. But yeah, let's kind of think about why there is no double taxation. So Mary used $2 million, so $2 million of labor earnings, which were taxed once, to purchase the house, the stock, and the cash savings. So it's not purchasing the cash savings, but kind of she used the $2 million of the labor earnings also to create cash savings. Yeah. So think about it, not at purchasing, but creating, and the cash savings. So the original amount which was taxed once was $2 million. But the real estate, so the estate of Mary was actually $11.5 million. So $9 million. So $9 million. Oh, it's actually 9.5, sorry. So $9.5 million of her total estate was created by capital gains on the stock and the house. And the thing here is that 9 million of this will never be taxed. Okay, so 9 million of this will actually never be taxed. So the amount of the kind of the value of the house and the value of the stock, which in sum is 9 million, will never be taxed. Only the remaining $500,000 that exceed the exemption will be taxed. So this basically means that if you consider her whole estate, then she paid taxes on $2 million, which were the labor earnings. So she paid taxes to get $2 million of labor earnings. For $9 million of her estate, which was created by capital gains due to the house and the stock, she didn't pay any she never paid any taxes at all for this. And only on $500,000, which exceed the exemption, so where you're above $11 million in total, you will have to pay taxes. Therefore, she either pays no taxes or one kind of one-time taxes. So one-time taxes are, for instance, the tax on labor earnings and the tax on the $500,000 which are exceeding the exemption. And no taxes are paid on the wealth which was due to the capital gains of stock and the house. Therefore, there is no double taxation here. And this finishes this exercise. And now we come to the last exercise for this problem set. So the problem set this week is quite short. So Pamplovia raised its estate tax rate from 30 to 50%. So again, estate tax is the tax that for instance, your parents, or the tax which needs to be paid on whatever your parents are inheriting you. However, it grandfathered in families whose householders were over 80 years old, allowing these families to be assessed the original 30% estate tax. How could you go about estimating the effects of estate tax rates in Paplovia on the magnitude of bequests? So what you would intuitively think is that if you increase the estate tax rate, then there will be less bequesting. So this is the thing which you would think intuitively. So how could we estimate this? So this is 4. So one way to estimate this is to use the so-called regression discontinuity approach. So regression discontinuity approach. So what you do in this approach is, so you cannot always apply it, but there some criteria need to be fulfilled, which here are partially fulfilled. So in a regression discontinuity approach, you have a set of individuals, for instance, and you have a policy which um, which applies to some subset of this set and does not apply to some other subset in the set. And the idea here is that the policy or the change applies, for instance, to some kind of characteristic of the set, which you can, for instance, rank in a monotonistic way. For instance, age, as in this example. So here we have a regression discontinuity situation because for people or for families whose households were over 80 years old, we have a treatment in a sense that there is less tax, there is a lower estate tax rate than families where the householders are below 80 years old, so 79 years and 80 years and below, and the other group was 81 years and above. So I think I think over also includes the 80 years old here. Yeah, sorry. So just to be clear. So if you're 80 years and over, then you pay 30%. If you're 79 and below, you pay 50%. So you see that you have this kind of characteristic of age here, which is determining whether you have to pay 30% or 50% of estate tax rate. And the regression discontinuity approach is kind of using this situation by comparing, for instance, here the average bequests of individuals or households with householders who are 80 years old or 81 years old, and to compare it with the average bequests of households where the householders are 79 and 78 years, for instance. And the idea is that you can somehow compare those two subsets because the only way that they are differing is a little bit of age, and on average, everything else should be the same in those two groups. So that's the idea of a regression discontinuity approach, which we can use here. So people who were 79 at the change or at the time of the change face a 50% tax. People who are 1 year older face a 30% rate. So what you could do is you could compare the bequests of people who are just above and including 80 with people who are just below and including 79. The idea is that the only difference between those two groups is on average the age. Yeah, so it's 1 or 2 years in age. Everything else should be on average the same. That's the assumption that needs to be fulfilled in order for the regression discontinuity approach to work out. And then you simply compare the bequests. And if you see that the bequests of people who are 79 and like slightly less. If the amount of bequests is lower than the bequests of people above 80, including 80, you could conclude that you could conclude or estimate the effect of the tax rate. Yeah. So by this approach, you can somehow estimate this effect. One issue could be given if there is a difference. So an issue if there is a policy which threats people below and above 80 different as well. So if there would be some other policy, so I cannot think of anything right now, but if there would be some other policy which would treat people above and below 80 different as well, so in addition to this difference in the estate tax rate, then obviously there is an issue here because you cannot disentangle the effects of this other policy from the effects of a reduction in the estate tax rate because you simply cannot do this thing. You cannot disentangle the two effects here, since both are applying to the same threshold, which is 80 here. And this could be an issue which you, like at least in this example here, couldn't solve. Yeah, but in general, if you have kind of a clean environment where there is a clear threshold and people cannot cheat. So that's also important that people cannot cheat and say that they're older even though they aren't. Then this approach, which we have here, the regression discontinuity approach, is quite a valid instrument in order to determine the effects of the estate tax on the magnitudes of bequests. And yes, with this, we finish this week's problem set. So see you next week then.